We've all played the fictional character fighting game at some point in our lives, pairing two characters against each other and arguing with our friends over who would win in a fight. Take that concept and throw $1 million at it, and you get Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. But instead of just giving us a fight many of us wanted to see, we get a convoluted mess of a movie to kickstart a franchise. Warner Brothers fell significantly behind last year, boasting only 2 commercial successes in San Andreas and Mad Max Fury Road, repeatedly pushing out humongous box office flops, such as Jupiter Ascending, which debuted during the February drought after months of post-production hell, panned by critics and audiences alike, Fantastic Four, which was everything but fantastic, and Terminator Genisys, which terminated a reboot and forgot that it was a movie made for humans. With that track record, Warner Brothers was gunning for Batman v Superman to be a sure success, putting enough money into the film to make it one of the most expensive of all time. And in reality, it's not so successful. The movie almost proved that brand alone could sell a movie and that critic scores mean nothing for opening weekend, which is what really seems to count. Except while breaking records opening day, the viewership rate fell dramatically despite having no competition until The Boss, which beat out Batman v Superman on its second weekend. I almost feel kind of embarrassed for the film at that point. The film starts off with the same origin story that we've seen before. Bruce Wayne's parents are killed, motivating him to become Batman. The only difference being that it's done more poorly than previous renditions. Why do we need this scene? To end on a silly image of Kid Bruce Wayne hovering in the middle of a flock of bats completely takes us out of the film, reminding us of a far superior scene in Batman Begins. The film should have started with the following scene, where Bruce Wayne is rushing into the city of Metropolis at ground zero as Superman fights Zod, with no regard for the collateral damage the fight has caused. This alone should have been the sole reason why the Caped Crusader wanted to take down the Man of Tomorrow, but of course that would be too simple for the plot. So we throw in Lex Nigma and Doomsday, just to satisfy Zack Snyder's clusterfuck fetish. We then cut to Lois Lane, who is reporting on war criminals in Africa. Lex Luthor's men kill the bodyguards of the warlords. Lois Lane is caught hostage because being a damsel in distress is apparently all she's good for. Superman hears only her voice completely across the world and saves the day, launching the man through about 5 walls, which I assume killed him, but the movie doesn't confirm this. He's a warlord, so why does it matter, right? Oh, and before I forget, Jimmy Olsen somehow became a CIA agent and was killed with no remorse from either Lois Lane or Superman because fuck Clark Kent's best friend, right? To be fair, Superman doesn't seem to have any remorse for anyone. In the recap of another 9/11 caused by Superman, Bruce Wayne runs around in civilian clothes looking to save children from falling debris and rescue the injured. Normally that would be Superman's role. Afterwards, he gets a little too distracted, having awkwardly playful bathtub sex to dwell on too much on the death and destruction he's caused to the city he's supposed to be protecting. Rather than his destruction of a major American city, it is the possible killing of a warlord in a third world country that launches the debate on why Superman is a menace to society, and somehow the collateral damage in Metropolis is never mentioned again, because any more invoking of 9/11 and you might split audiences, right? Oh wait, I thought this movie was too smart for most audiences. So smart that they realized that the American public would be way more upset about collateral murder in Iraq than 9/11. So Superman is summoned to the Supreme Court to answer for his complete disregard for diplomacy and democracy, often heading fist first into the action without any permission from the United States government. Superman shows up before he even gets a chance to speak. The senator drinks Lex Luthor's pee, and the entire building is demolished by a wheelchair bomb. So this Smart script doesn't even let Superman have a minute to explain his actions, in public or private, before it devolves into explosions and literal potty humor. Not to mention that if there is a capable female in a Zack Snyder film, she's gotta get blown up. Serves her right for thinking that she could do more than model. It's also not explained why Lex Nigma intentionally blew up his sidekick. Let's take a step back for a minute, because there are about 3 or 4 plot lines going on at once. Although the film is called Batman v Superman, there's another character who's actually the villain in this film. A spoiled, narcissistic frat boy who blurts out complete nonsense, who acts very awkward and aggressive around women, brags about his superior intellect despite being a little bit more than an obnoxious dolt, wears flashy outfits. Sound familiar? Even a casual DC fan can see it's obviously not Lex Luthor, the brains to combat Superman's brawn. He actually bears a striking resemblance to Edward Nygma, also known as the Riddler. Oh, and wouldn't you know it, Jesse Eisenberg originally auditioned for a cameo as Edward Nygma. Wow, what a shock. Many of you might be wondering, why does Lex Luthor have hair? Which, of course, this was a nod to hardcore fans who are aware that Lex Luthor was actually made bald out of an error, and subsequent stories have either explained reasons why he became bald, or in this movie's case, just shaves his hair off. Because Snyder has to prove to the audience that Jesse Eisenberg is in fact the Lex Luthor and not a wacky man in love with everything green and has a knack for riddles, not kryptonite. Batman v Superman seems to have quite the identity crisis, even aside from Lex Nygma. The femme fatale of the film, who defies the tropes of being a femme fatale by being absolutely useless and unable to do anything she attempts, is a beautiful socialite attending charity events, shopping for ancient artifacts, and casually stealing right under Batman's nose. No, this is not Diana Prince, the influential military figure and occasional boutique owner. This is clearly Selina Kyle. Too bad Catwoman's not in the movie. Gal Gadot's character is barely in the movie, but she doesn't fail to make a bad impression. First, she attempts to steal Batman's hard drive to find mystery photos, but being a woman in a Zack Snyder film, she can't possibly do anything on her own, so she has to rely on Batman to take 2 minutes to find the very thing that she was looking for. How empowering. Then, she is continuously 5 steps behind Batman and Superman. However, once she puts on the Wonder Woman costume, she gets to do a whole of 2 things that aren't modeling for the camera and hiding her lack of muscles behind a tiny, tiny shield. I take it all back. Clearly, this is the strong, independent, feminist model of our times. As far as her fighting is concerned, this Israeli military veteran has almost all of her moves either done by a stunt double or by CGI. All the time in the gym with those 2-pound weights clearly paid off. Even Doomsday isn't right. Doomsday is a clone of a monster made in a Kryptonian science lab from the Death of Superman comics. What we get instead is a creature made from a special blend of DNA from a Kryptonian who came to Earth and Lex Luthor, created to destroy Superman, who discharges electricity from his hands as a major superpower. This sounds a lot closer to Nuclear Man from Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, but instead of extending his fabulous nails, fragments of bone appear to give him the more recognizable look from the comics, minus the white hair. Okay, I guess at some point we have to get back to the actual film, even though you really wouldn't want to. Batman arms himself to the teeth, trains his body, and prepares to fight the Man of Steel. But of course, Batman, with all the skills of a detective, doesn't know how to pick a fight with Superman, so Lex Luthor has to do it for him. He kidnaps Martha Kent, who, like most women in this film, is another plot device put in purely to motivate the male protagonist, because Zack Snyder cannot fathom that a woman can do anything besides posing and looking pretty, and apparently hasn't read a Superman comic in over 30 years. So Martha Kent is kidnapped, and somehow Superman can't hear her cry for help, which isn't explained, but most likely it's because he's not boning her. We hope. But he then comes the second Lois is pushed off the building. Lex then threatens to kill his mom if he doesn't bring him Batman's head, but since the movie is PG-13, we already know that isn't gonna happen. And since this is a Zack Snyder film, it wouldn't be nearly as hardcore as the animated films, but just wait for the R-rated version, you guys! Another issue with this film is the abrupt dream sequences. Batman falls into the Batcave and is elevated by bats. Dream? Batman is attacked by his own demons, manifesting themselves into a monster that bursts out of Martha Wayne's nameplate in the mausoleum. Hallucination? The only purpose this moment serves is to beat into the audience's head that Bruce Wayne's mother is named Martha, so that his hesitance to kill Superman with a kryptonite spear would have more weight, or so Zack Snyder would hope. We then get the Nightmare Batman sequence, which places Bruce Wayne in a post-apocalypse, where Superman has a panzer army, and Batman proceeds to fight and kill off some before getting captured. Superman uses his heat vision to kill off a couple guys before ripping Batman's cowl off, still laughably coming equipped with black makeup. This scene is supposed to set up a Justice League plotline, which from my understanding was a mesh between Injustice, Flashpoint, and of course the Darkseid plotline. But why is it in this movie? To get fans of the comic books excited about movies to come? Well, they done fucked up Doomsday, they're probably gonna fuck this up too. It almost feels like the test audiences pointed out which scenes were the absolute dumbest, and then the studio retroactively made these scenes dream sequences. Oh, and Batman snapped some guy's neck at one point? What happened to the no-kill rule? This movie throws that off the roof. Batman's no-kill policy goes back to his roots, where Batman had a much harsher sense of justice. Tim Burton also didn't care about this rule either, especially in Batman Returns, where he straight up bombs dudes to death, killing like 4 goons. In this film, I counted 2 men completely destroyed by the Batmobile, a snapped neck, destroying a highly volatile flamethrower strapped to a man's back, and a handful of deaths either caused by collateral damage from explosions or deliberate negligence. But what do you expect from a guy that quotes Dick Cheney, not Robin, the vice president under George Bush, who in regards to Pakistan said, if there is a 1% chance that Pakistani scientists are helping Al-Qaeda build or develop a nuclear weapon, we have to treat it as a certainty in terms of our response. It's not about our analysis, it's about our response. Sound familiar?
Jesus, Alfred, count the dead. Thousands of people. What's next? Millions? He has the power to wipe out the entire human race, and if we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
However, Batman killing a couple murderers in cold blood still pales in comparison to Superman killing and injuring hundreds, if not thousands of innocents in Metropolis during his fight against Zod. Speaking of Metropolis, this film puts Metropolis and Gotham as neighboring cities, just across the Hudson River, which puts Metropolis in New Jersey. The problem with this is that Gotham and Metropolis are both New York City. Gotham has been a nickname for New York City for well over 100 years. So although Gotham may be updated with elements of cities like Chicago and Detroit, it's still the same place. Similar to how in Ghost in the Shell, Tokyo was reimagined to be more similar to Hong Kong. It's still Tokyo, but it looks like Hong Kong. Same goes for Blade Runner in LA. However, in the comics, Gotham was represented as the seedier side of New York. Metropolis has clearly been more representative of the shiny Times Square side of New York. Or as Frank Miller has said, Metropolis is the New York in the daytime, and Gotham City is the New York at night. So no matter what you do or which iteration you draw from, having the two coexist is pretty confusing. It's only made more confusing by the fact that in the Nolan movies, Gotham was shot in Chicago, and in this film, Metropolis was shot in Chicago. It's also really weird to imagine 2 major cities, presumably 2 of the biggest cities in the US, directly next to each other. and each of their own separate systems of superheroes and villains, but somehow have not merged into the same place. More recently, Metropolis has been set as DC, which makes more sense allegorically and geographically. Fans and critics are extremely divided on this film. The general consensus is that critics hated it and audiences loved it. But the box office return seems to tell a different story. Batman v Superman made $27 million on its opening night in select theaters on Thursday and pulled in $166 million opening weekend. Was it just the church-going public that called away for Easter? Probably not, because the viewership fell another 70% its second weekend. Of course, with any franchise movie with low critical reception, there will always be a handful of apologists, who for the most part are casual film goers that are the types of people who go to the movies purely for their entertainment value. The other crowd is the same type of crowd you see defending the Star Wars prequels. Oftentimes, these people go to the movies to rekindle a fond memory from their childhood. Simply seeing the characters they grew up with is enough for them to be satisfied, but that shouldn't be your target audience. This film has been repeatedly called dark, but it's not close enough to the core materials to appeal to fans of the DC franchise. From the comics, to the animated features, to the Nolan films. It's also not funny or lighthearted to appeal to Marvel fans, which leaves a small group of action fans who are not fans of the franchise and fans who refuse to accept how bad this is. That's not a great target audience if you're trying to pull in big returns. These are the same fans who launched an online petition to release the longer, R-rated cut in theaters. Zack Snyder has also weighed in, saying that the original cut of the film was almost 4 hours. But will that make the film any better? Other than some post-CGI blood effects when Superman is killed, what really is the difference? After the backlash of the film, Warner Brothers started releasing snippets of cut footage to try and hold hope that Batman v Superman was just another Kingdom of Heaven, a movie that was critically panned until the director's cut was released and proved not only to be a coherent film, but a good one. Studio cuts are normal, but it's rare to find any major franchise film, say for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, that would dare to go beyond 2 hours and 30 minutes. Will the director's cut of Batman v Superman prove itself to be the superior film? Probably. But will it be a good film? Probably not. If, after all this, you still want a true Batman vs. Superman experience, check out the animated Batman Superman film, or The Dark Knight Returns, or even Lego Batman Beleaguered does a better job. Alas, with any review, especially one that speaks with a tone of harshness, you have to stress that any opinion of the film is subjective, and you may very well have seen something in the film that we didn't. If that is the case, we're not trying to rob you of your experience, but instead we want to understand what it is about the film on an objective level that you think is good. Please share your comments or email us at allwalksoffilm@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.